I've got some bad news. Surging Sparks isn't sus. Despite the Pokemon Company having the opportunity to give Surging Sparks the greatest set abbreviation in history, they went with SSP instead of giving us sus. I will never be able to forgive them for this. What helps soften the blow is the fact that the second half of cards releasing in Surging Sparks when it comes to Pokemon TCG Live on November 7th aren't half bad. Japan gets their Supercharged Breaker set on October 18th, which will be combined with Paradise Dragona and the Sylveon EX and Ceruledge EX decks to make up our Surging Sparks next month. If you missed it, you can see my preview of the first half in the video linked in the description. But enough chit-chat-ot. Let's see what Supercharged Breaker has to offer, good or bad. Okay, I wasn't wrong about Pikachu EX, just misguided. A question I've been asked several times is why Miraidon plays Mewtwo EX when Mewtwo EX can't ever attack. Well, it's because Mewtwo EX is a Lightning Terra Pokemon. So not only does it activate Area 0, but it's also searchable and put directly into playable with Miraidon EX's ability. It gets the job done, it's just wasted. Enter Pikachu EX. We knew it was the headliner of Supercharged Breaker, so I told people that if it was semi-decent, it would see play over Mewtwo. Well, while it will replace Mewtwo and Miraidon, it's another Lightning Terra Pokemon that can't attack in a Miraidon deck. For a Grass, Lightning, and Metal, Pikachu EX does 300 damage with Topaz Bolt, which comes at the cost of discarding 3 energy. That alone is pretty awesome. But then you add in the Resolute Heart ability and Pikachu EX becomes a real threat. If Pikachu has full HP and will be knocked out by damage from an attack, it's not knocked out and its remaining HP becomes 10. Obviously, decks like Dragapult EX, Frostlass, and anyone running the Dusknoir line don't care about the ability, but everyone else needs to be afraid. As Pikachu is a Terra Pokemon, it can take advantage of Sparkling Crystal to reduce the attack cost by 1. Otherwise, it pairs perfectly with Magneton. Using its Overvolt Discharge ability, you can knock out Magneton and attach any 3 basic energy from your discard pile to your Lightning Pokemon however you want. So not only can Pikachu survive a hit from a lot of Pokemon, but it can one-hit KO most of them too. Later in the video, I'll be talking about Terapagos and Gravity Mountain, 2 more cards that can make Pikachu better. Ultimately, yes, Pikachu EX deserves to headline Surging Sparks because it has major power. Moving to the rest of the EX Pokemon, Kevin Durant's ability continues the tradition of Durant cards milling your opponent, though it's fairly weak. When you slap a Durant EX from your hand onto the bench, you can discard the top card of their deck. Kinda meh. Not even Penny or Scoop Up Cyclone makes it better either. But if you really wanted to, you could create a Penny plus Heroes Tape loop deck with Kricketune that still loses to Raging Bolt. And the attack isn't great either. 120 base plus 30 more for each prize your opponent's taken. Sure, you can manually boost this with Dusclops or Dusknoir, but a 3 energy attack cost sucks. And dealing 150 or 180 early on with somebody who has just 190 hit points doesn't excite me enough to put too much thought into it. Ability-based dual typing isn't anything new, but mixing together fire and grass types on Scovillain EX is great. Hitting Charizard EX for weakness plus some other dark types, metal types, and grass types. Unlike the other Scovillain EX that is meant more to annoy and control, this Scovillain is spicy. For 2 fire energy, it does 10 base damage plus 70 more for each damage counter on it. The obvious pairing is with Magma Basin. It both powers up Scovillain with energy and with pain. Except with just 2 damage counters, you're only dealing 150 damage. There's a few other ways to add to this. Frostlass is risky, though it's guaranteed ramp. And with Scovillain EX only having 260 hit points, 240 after a Magma Basin, it's not like it's a tank. You could always pair it with Heroescape if you want extra HP, I just think Prime Catcher is better. Mulga is always a decent option to have in a self-damaging deck, spreading 10 damage to everybody for a single energy while also having free retreat. But Scovillain might be a deck that runs Dodrio or Gengar with Damage Pump. I've definitely soured on Dodrio after struggling with it in Marowak, but 1 Magma Basin plus 1 Damage Pump means Scovillain's doing 290 damage for 2 energy. That makes it playable, just try not to think about how much damage it'd deal to someone like Dialga V-Star, which is both weak to and resists its attack. Immunity is almost always a good thing, especially when you go to testify about what you saw For the Win doing on January 6th. Unfortunately, while someone like Mimikyu blocks 2 prizers, Milotic EX is terrible. Get it? Because it only blocks Terra Pokemon? Basically, Pokemon like Charizard EX, Dragapult EX, and the Ogerpons can't do anything to Milotic unless they run Cancel and Cologne. It's cute, just a little too narrow of a strategy. And it's not like the attack is doing Milotic any favors, hitting for 160 and causing sleep. So for someone like Raging Bolt EX, you're two-shotting it, praying for sleep to stick while it's one-shotting you. A nice combo is just copying the Archaludon strategy. There's a Feebas that does 10 damage for each damage counter on it. Use Survival Brace or Hero's Tape, try to survive an attack, then use Relicanth to copy Feebas and hopefully take a one-hit KO for 1 energy. The nicest thing I can say about Palossand EX is that it has an interesting attack. For a Water, Psychic, and Fighting, remember that Sparkling Crystal removes one of those. Palossand puts damage counters on each of your opponent's bench Pokemon until its remaining HP is 100. There are several drawbacks though. Only hitting bench Pokemon means their active is safe. Evolving exists, so the attack does nothing to Charmander or Pidgey or Dracloak or Dusclops. And the attack cost is awkward, so finding the right partner will be tough. Though if everything goes according to plan, Sandtomb can finish off those with 100 hit points left. I guess my main issue is that a Palossand deck won't start taking a knockout until turn 3, and that's if everything's going right. If it was up to me, I'd be hyping up Hydreigon EX so much right now, but I've been screwed over so much in the past that I just can't. For a Darkness and a Colorless, it deals 200 damage and discards the top 3 cards of their deck. That's good, milling while potentially taking KOs. And its second attack was so strong that the Pokemon Company decided to add a 4th energy requirement to it for fear of breaking the game, I guess. So for a Psychic, Darkness, Metal, and a Colorless, Sparkling Crystal is your friend here, its second attack does 130 to their active plus 2 of their bench Pokemon. So it's a slightly stronger Kyurem. I don't know, I see the potential, there's just something tickling my feet right now. Also, I don't trust it. Don't get me wrong, I want it to be good. But it's a Stage 2 Darkness Terra, we already have one of those and Hydreigon's not dethroning it. Because Reuniqueless sees so much play, the Pokemon Company decided to print its attack on a 2-prizer with just 160 hit points that requires a Fire, Water, and Darkness energy. Completely usable in a meme, wall, or stall deck, Totsadiri EX can take every Pokemon from the top 10 cards in your deck and put them into play. Be it a basic Stage 1 or Stage 2, it can lure them all down. And that's about it. Sneaky Pump sucks, dealing 100 damage. So it's all about Cinnabar Lure. Using Academy at night or Cypher Maniac, you can guarantee a Pokemon or 2, but who are you getting? Dreadnought, Aegislash, and Gastrodon? I'm just not convinced that Totsadiri is better than Reuniqueless because it requires 3 different types of energy. That's not worth it. More like sushi you never, am I right? Just like Slacking EX, I was born to slack off. For 2 colorless energy, this 340 hit point monster does 280 damage. The drawback is that it can't attack unless your opponent has a V or EX in play. Most decks have that, you can always play the Skin Flute or use Mantine to force one into play, but what if it's strictly a single prize deck on the other side of the table? Well, that's where the other slacking comes in. For a reversal energy, it deals 240 damage. The fact it'll probably stay asleep after attacking does suck, though you probably shouldn't expect it to survive anyways. Oh, and don't forget a copy of Kyurem. Lost Box can deny you a 2-prizer, but they can't stop a Colress from hitting the bin. With all those boring EXs out of the way, let's get to what you really care about. Pokemon that I try to convince you are worth playing when we both know they aren't. First up, we're getting 2 Execute and Surging Sparks. The 30 hit point one has an attack that lets it evolve right away on turn 1. Because there's going to be both the previously revealed Exeggutor EX and the newly revealed Baby Exeggutor. This goofy goober has a true meme attack. For each energy attached to both active Pokemon, you flip a coin. For each heads, it does 60 damage. So it could potentially one-shot a Charizard EX for a reversal energy, which just makes me even sadder that the Stage 1 Zoroark rotated out earlier this year, because this would have been a fun inclusion. Until we get a coin reflip card like Victini or Glimwood Tangle, which may never happen, this will never be a thing. But at least we can whack off together for an hour or 2 on stream. If you have a Vivillon in the active, a Terra on the bench, Area 0 in play, and 7 Pokemon capable of evolving, you can use Vivillon's attack to evolve all 7 of those Pokemon. Yeah, this will never see play, and TM Evolution is just better in every situation. Reminiscent of Excadrill from a few years ago, both Rabska and Wo-Chien become insane when you have 3 or fewer cards in deck. Having such a small deck is always a bit troublesome, but with Pokestop Research, Trekking Shoes, a ton of items, and someone like Bibarel or Kirlia, you can get down pretty low pretty quickly. If you do, Rabska does 240 damage for a single energy, one-shotting Raging Bolt EX and Charizard EX. And Wo-Chien does 20 damage for a Grass and a Colorless. But if you have 3 or fewer cards in deck, it also spreads 120 to 2 bench Pokemon. This is absolutely going to be a rogue deck, and I can't wait to test it out. Every Paldean Tauros is getting a card in Surging Sparks, and each is more disappointing than the last. There is a theme here, though. The Fighting Tauros stops basics from attacking, the Fire Tauros does 180 to a Stage 1 Pokemon, and the Water Tauros puts 2 energy attached to a Stage 2 Pokemon back into your opponent's hand. While the Fighting Tauros could annoy Raging Bolt, switching breaks the attack's effect. I'm sure Stall decks will find a use for the Water Tauros since it only needs a double turbo, though the best Stage 2 decks right now are Dragapult and Charizard, and Energy Disruption isn't all that terrible for them. Imagine if Incineroar EX could deal 280 damage with its attack. Would that all of a sudden make it playable? Probably not. But putting Victini in play does increase the damage your Evolution Fire Pokemon deal by 10, and it stacks, giving you a potential plus 40 damage. So if you wanted to make someone like Incineroar potentially playable, this is your ticket. And as an added bonus, it's gettable with Buddy Buddy Poffin. I mean, Stelladirge is okay, and you could pair it with either Stelladirge EX. I just don't think it's terribly playable. Stopping effects of attacks is fine, I guess, and its attack is literally just Palkia V-Star, but it's a Stage 2. Still, it can be powered up with Magma Base and Remella, and its damage is boosted with Area Zero and a lot of bench Pokemon. Alright, maybe I'm coming around a bit on Stelladirge, but only slightly. Volcarona, meanwhile, sucks no matter how many Victini you have in play, whereas someone like Centiskorch could be interesting in a Dodrio deck. It deals 130 damage for a single energy, while also spreading 30 damage to each of your bench Pokemon. Obviously, cards like Dragapult EX and Sableye prevent the strategy from actually working, but if you avoid good decks, it's still probably not working. There's one really good Pokemon that evolves from Charcadet coming in Surging Sparks. Then there's these two. Ceruledge is hilarious against Lugia V-Star and nobody else. While you could use a Reversal Energy on Armarouge or maybe even copy it with Slowking, but overall they aren't interesting. That new Charcadet art is sick though. Everyone on the internet freaked out about this Spheal art because people on the internet are weird. Unless you're subscribed to me, then you're cool. Lost in all that Spheal appeal is the interesting Walrein. For a single water energy, none of your opponent's Pokemon can attack the following turn unless they have 3 or more energy attached. And that effect extends to all of their Pokemon. Raging Bolt and Charizard can get around this fairly easily, but paired with things like Crushing Hammer and Bouffalant, you could make yourself a funny rogue deck that annoys 1 or 2 people. Or just put it in with Slowking or Tatsugiri EX and see if anything happens. To answer the question I always get, the Spheal cosmetics in PTCGL were only obtainable through a code given out during Worlds by watching partnered streams. Hopefully it's added to the game as a purchasable item because these are easily the best cosmetics anyone can use. A Pokemon designed to destroy Mew EX and nobody else, Iron Bundle does 200 damage for 3 energy if they have a 0 retreat cost. But the damage goes down by 50 for every pip in their retreat cost, so it starts sucking real quick. Chien-Pao is interesting, copying the ability from Evolving Skies Pumpkaboo, allowing it to bump a stadium. And the attack means you can reuse Rich Energy every turn to draw 4 cards, but only dealing 120 damage and needing 3 energy to do it just doesn't lotion my feet. For those going to Surging Sparks pre-releases at the end of October, Chien-Pao will be one of the promos, alongside Indeedee, Gouging Fire, and Magneton. To those who pull Indeedee or Chien-Pao, I'm sorry. You might not know this, but Rotom backwards is Spawn of Satan. I don't know why the Pokemon Company made this card, but it gives solid control decks far too much power. For a single Lightning Energy, Rotom's first attack discards any items and tools from your opponent's hand. Seriously. I'm not one to complain about Charizard EX decks getting what's coming to them after an instant charge all the way up to a hand of 8, but having a basic Pokemon that can discard all 4 of your rare candy and your Forest Sealstone on turn 1 going second is too far. It's like Airy and Xerosix Machinations had a baby, then that baby gave birth to pure evil. Even if you're not going after rare candies, it's also good at hitting Ultra Ball, Energy Retrieval, Palpad, and pretty much every card people use for consistency. Make no mistake, this is one of the strongest cards in Surging Sparks. That doesn't mean I think it should exist. What do I feel after playing TCG Live for nearly 3 years? Numbness. Stunfisk can paralyze and discard an energy from your opponent's active, but it's a coin flip. Again, if we get reflip cards, it might see play. Until then, no. As for Kilowattrel, we've had cards like this in the past that attack and spread the energy around. It could be interesting in a single prize Lightning deck, but if you're playing a Lightning deck, it's going to be Miraidon EX, not Kilowattrel. Unfortunately, Tapu Koko is just not strong enough to run solely with Magneton. But 180 for 3 energy and a Miraidon deck on a single prizer is justifiable, though you do have to be losing the game. At the very least, it can grab you 2 lightning Pokemon from deck, though that's more useful in an evolution deck, not a basic heavy one. Miraidon is interesting as it basically gives future decks a Mimikyu. For 2 energy, it deals 40 damage and makes all of your future Pokemon immune to damage from your opponent's Pokemon EX. The drawback is that if they use Boss's Orders or Prime Catcher or Counter Catcher or Iron Bundle, the effect is broken. It could be a thing in 2025 when every V is rotated out, giving the future deck a way to auto-win against the X decks, but that's about it. It's been far too long since I whacked off, and looking at this Togekiss makes me want to do it so badly. Whenever your opponent's active Pokemon is knocked out, a coin is flipped. If it's heads, you take 1 more prize card. While it doesn't stack, meaning more than 1 Togekiss is unnecessary, read the wording again. If you hadn't noticed, the ability triggers on a Dusclops or Dusknoir or Magneton on your opponent's turn. So if they KO their own Pokemon in the active spot, you could potentially take 2 prizes instead of just 1. Obviously, a skilled player won't make that mistake, but it's funny. Paired with 151 Chansey, you could potentially win the game on turn 2 after taking just a single knockout. And if that happens, I will send you 1 PTCGL code card, because that'd be insane and I want to farm those free internet points. Because the Pokemon Company won't let them be individuals, the late Guardians are paired up yet again. For Mesprit, its first attack is decent in a world without Gardevoir or Xatu, accelerating Psychic Energy from hand. Its second attack, Legendary Burst, meanwhile, does 160 damage for 2 energy if you have Uxie and Azelf on your bench. Not amazing, but definitely playable, especially considering that all 3 are poffinable. Azelf is a closer, dealing 10 damage plus 10 more for each damage counter on your opponent's Pokemon, just like the Mimikyu from Lost Origin. The potential Beyonce of the group is Uxie. Whereas Yveltal requires their Pokemon to already be damaged, Uxie just puts 2 damage counters on each of your opponent's Pokemon for a single energy. The fact it's a Psychic Energy makes the Monkey Dory Frostlass combo tougher, but you could always use it early in an Yveltal deck with Luminous Energy to at least get some quick pings. Overall, though, a deck with just the late Guardians is closer to meme than rogue, but still worth a shot. Back in the day, one of my favorite cards was Rule of Evil Weavile. Paired with Flying Flip Tapu Koko, I was a menace on PTCGO. Cofagrigus brings that back, except instead of dealing damage that can be blocked by Manaphy, it puts 6 damage counters on every Pokemon in play with an ability. You could pair this with Uxie for damage counter shenanigans, as Frostlass isn't really an option since it would be done after 2 Cofagrigus attacks. There's a ton of potential here, and with more and more ability decks showing up with each set, it'd be egregious to forget this exists. Reminiscent of something Mistress Paddlebottom used on me last night, Meowstic uses the Relaxing Teaser item card to give you a free gust. Problem is, Relaxing Teaser isn't busted, and you'll have to find space in your deck for at least a 1/1 Meowstic and at least 2 teasers, but 3 or 4 is probably the better number. Relaxing Teaser itself can only be used on turn 1 going second. All it does is put an energy attached to one of your opponent's Pokemon into their hand. If we didn't have insane amounts of acceleration these days, it'd still be filler. But by discarding a teaser with Meowstic's ability, you can bring up any of their bench Pokemon. If you have the room in your deck, it's great, but Bosses and Prime Catcher and Counter Catcher already exist, so it's probably not going to be a meta combo. Let's be honest, you forgot Annihilate was a Pokemon. The attack on this one is great, KOing both active Pokemon. But it's a stage 2. Maybe you could pair it with Togekiss and Chansey for shenanigans, or Mimikyu and some sort of wall Pokemon to buy you time. Even then, though, you still need to take 3 KOs to win. Annihilate would be awesome if they brought back 3 prize Pokemon, something I think we can all agree was healthy for the game and should definitely return. As it stands now, though, I have to put it between Rogue and Meme. Donphan can reduce the damage it takes by 100, except with just 150 hit points, that's not good enough. And even with a Hero's Cape attached, it still kinda sucks. Glamour is slightly interesting, preventing energy attachments from hand. But think of how many cards accelerate energy from the deck or discard pile, and then remember that switching breaks the lockdown, you'll never think about this card again. With Surging Sparks being the final set of the year, this could be our last chance at future and ancient cards. Or they continue it for another year, who knows. Anyways, Fluttermane's first attack is just Altaria's, except it only moves the damage counters from one of your benched ancient Pokemon to your opponent's active. Raging Bolt with an ancient booster has 300 hit points, while Roaring Moon has 290. Fluttermane attacking for 2 colorless is awesome, meaning it's a potentially really good inclusion in those decks, especially if you struggle against someone like Dragapult EX or Charizard EX. Koraidon, meanwhile, seems like the best backup attacker in Baby Roaring Moon. It hits for fighting weakness and can deal 180 damage for 2 colorless, provided one of your ancient Pokemon attacked last turn. The reason Walking Wake was used recently is because it had a 1 retreat cost. Swap out Walking Wake, add Koraidon, now you have a way to deal with fighting weak, colorless, and darkness Pokemon. Gastrodon has a chance to be one of the most defining cards in Surging Sparks, but it's maybe a little too balanced. If Gastrodon is on your bench Stage 2 Pokemon don't have abilities. That's crazy! It means Charizard EX, Pidgeot EX, Gardevoir EX, Baxcalibur, Archeops, and Dusknoir all lose their abilities. Problem is, they can boss your Gastrodon up to reactivate their abilities, or they can just have the Stage 2 in their active spot. So someone like Pidgeot EX and its free retreat doesn't care too much, and someone like Dusknoir with its blowing itself up is unbothered as well. Still, while it is play-aroundable, Gastrodon could shut down some of the strongest decks in Standard by simply existing, and that's pretty crazy. The Pokemon Company always forgets one key thing when it comes to Grafaiai cards: making them good. Some of them are wacky, and this is no exception. It's able to forcibly attach 3 energy from your opponent's discard pile to their Pokemon. Then its attack does 40 damage for each energy attached to all of their Pokemon. Yet another card that would fit perfectly into a Zoroark Stage 1 deck if it still existed. This is unfortunately way too easy played around to be playable. Despite the fun attack name on Alolan Dugtrio and their glorious flowing hair, these 2 cards aren't very good. Yeah, 120 for free is nice, but that's 3-shotting a Charizard EX. So this guy's in meme territory, and even that might be a stretch. After nearly 5 years since the launch of Sword and Shield, we're finally getting our first ever non-rule box Eternatus. Unfortunately, it's going to see less play than Radiant Eternatus. The only real use is with Regidrago V-Star, as copying Eternatus' attack does 230 damage and discards a Stadium in play. But if there's no Stadium, it does nothing. So I don't see this being added to Regidrago decks. Kecleon has the same ability as Ambipom, preventing damage on a coin flip, except with a much worse attack. Instead of me telling you if it's good or not, ask yourself this question: why aren't you subscribed to me? Also, when's the last time you saw an Ambipom deck? Now this is the type of whacking off I'd pay to see. While it's definitely not playable whatsoever because switching exists, a Rangaroo gives your opponent's active a colorless weakness. Probably the best thing to come from this will be the bugs it produces on PTCGL. Because I mean, even if it was guaranteed to work, who exactly would benefit? Zoroark V-Star already does up to 430 damage, and Terapagos EX doesn't really want to waste a turn using a Rangaroo. Oh, and for those who want to know my weakness, it's feet. It feels like we're creeping closer and closer to Mousehold EX finally being a thing. This new Mousehold lets you put 2 Mousehold or Mousehold EX from your deck directly into play. So you can use Area Zero and a Terra Pokemon to maybe have 7 total Tandemaus and Mousehold in play, meaning Mousehold EX counterattacks for 210 damage. If you want to make a Terra Box deck, like say with every Ogerpon, Terapagos is something you'll be running. It's also kind of crazy paired with basic Stellar Terra Pokemon like Pikachu EX and Terapagos EX, as its first attack accelerates up to 3 energy of different types to your Terra Pokemon however you want. Specifically for Pikachu EX, you'd use this turn 1 to get everything prepped for your Magneton sweep. This Terapagos is 100% playable, but it's definitely more suited for basic Terra decks. Sure, it's not horrible in Evolution Terra decks, but not really being able to do anything turn 1 with this Terapagos is terrible. Something I called a long time ago, the Scramble Switch Ace spec is getting reprinted in Surging Sparks. While it's super powerful, able to switch out your active Pokemon with the benched one and move all the energy to that new active, it's too far down on the depth chart to replace Prime Catcher. Remember Versus Seeker? Well, just like how Perfect Mixer is a better Battle Compressor in A-Spec form, Miraculous Intercom is a better Versus Seeker in A-Spec form. With Miraculous Intercom, you can put 2 supporters from your discard pile directly into your hand. I don't see it being used all that much in decks like Raging Bolt that want Prime Catcher, so you know what that means. It's something stall decks can use to easily reuse Misfortune Sisters and Xerosic's Machinations and Airy. The final A-Spec in Surging Sparks is Amulet of Hope. They literally just took Radiant Jirachi's ability and slapped it on a tool. Because Lost Vacuum and Jamming Tower exist, it's just not worth playing. You'd almost be better off with Secret Box because that's almost always guaranteed to get you value. You might think Mystery Set is bad. It lets you look at the top 3 cards of your deck. Then you either put them back in any order or shuffle them onto the bottom of your deck. In reality, this is perfect for decks that can cut themselves down to 56 cards, because controlling your top decks and draws is great. I'm not sure how much play it'll see pre-rotation, but once we lose all the F-block cards in March and the meta narrows, don't be surprised to see it. Fluorite is probably going to be the least played technical machine, and that's in a world with Turbo Energize. Requiring 3 different types of energy, it heals all damage from each of your Terra Pokemon. The effect is fine, but you have to have Grass, Water, and Psychic Energy in your deck. Then you have to spend a turn healing in a one-hit KO format. I thought maybe healing a Charizard EX with a Hero's Cape could work, but then you'd have to add 3 random energy to even think about doing it. Big miss here. I don't like these next 2 cards very much. They're just more type-based damage reductions that will only ever see play if a certain type begins dominating the meta, and even then they're not without weaknesses. It's tough to say if Cyrano will be playable. Hyper Aroma already exists to get Stage 1 Pokemon, though in something like Charizard, Pidgeot, and Dragapult, this is just an easy way to get all of your evolutions. I wouldn't be surprised to see one copy sneak its way into EX evolution decks for consistency, though it'll never be run in a basic deck because they already have Nest Ball. The best Lightning deck is Miraidon EX. Miraidon EX and its cohorts don't expect to survive very long. And if they do, Penny's a much better option for healing. Clement heals just 60 from all of your Lightning Pokemon, making it fairly unnecessary. Just about the only use for Jasmine's Gaze is pairing it with Zamazenta V-Star to buy yourself an extra turn at any point in the game. Used together, they reduce the damage your Pokemon take by 130. Otherwise, on its own, Jasmine is just a 30 damage reduction. Not great, especially when Dragapult EX spreads damage counters, not damage. I'm not super excited for Exciting Stadium. Basic Pokemon get an additional 30 hit points. In a vacuum, that is absolutely amazing. But if they bump it with another Stadium or use Lost Vacuum or Chen Pao, what was the point? And with multiple decks running Area Zero, your hope of this staying in play long term is dashed faster than the kid from The Incredibles. Gravity Mountain, meanwhile, is like an opposite Exciting Stadium. This reduces the hit points of all Stage 2 Pokemon by 30, meaning Pikachu EX can one-shot Dragapult and Charizard. Since the value of the mountain is on your turn, it could be an interesting way to sneakily take KOs out of nowhere. Now for a bit of housekeeping. And unlike the last time someone paid me for housekeeping, my top will be staying on. Pokebeach is guesstimating that both Flamigo EX and Kilowattrel EX will make their way into Surging Sparks. These are 2 gym promos from Japan that were released months ago. Like most gym promos, they suck. Kilowattrel is just the worst Raichu V, while Flamigo EX doesn't even get acknowledged. Additionally, Time is apparently releasing in Surging Sparks. As much as I want to run this card and say it's time to duel, there's a decent chance the PTCGL dev just doesn't implement it. That's because Blaine's Twiz show was skipped over. While Blaine's worked in PTCGO, it's never been usable in Live and even created scenarios where you could build a 56 card deck because Live is a well-made game. Because Time's effect is complicated, the dev could just decide they don't want to code it and it'll never be time to duel. Looking ahead to 2025, there's a few other gym promos we'll get at some point. The only noteworthy one is TM Machine, which gets 3 technical machines directly from your deck. While it would pair perfectly with Rotom V-Star, TM Machine likely won't be out until after rotation. A rotation that will take Rotom V-Star with it. There's always a chance it's thrown into Prismatic Evolution, our January special set featuring EX Evolutions, but nothing's confirmed yet. And there you have it. Surging Sparks will be out on November 7th in Pokemon TCG Live, and I'll have plenty of videos out between now and then. I'll also have more TCG Pocket videos going up because dumb me thought he'd enjoy the game, but instead it's been boring as hell, but like some 41 I'm in too deep and I have to keep going.